Now, what I'm about to say is not exactly breaking news, but men and women are different, told you. But how do their differences play out politically, and what can the parties do to win their votes? Paola Bonadonna has been looking into this.
I want more childcare provision.
I want more help to keep the elderly in their own homes. I want more money spent on preventative health care.
I would like politicians to be honest, and I don't think any of them are.
That's what I want.
How important is it for political parties to be in tune with what women want? Ben Page is the head of the polling company Ipsos Mori.
The bedrock of Conservative support is basically older women, and because there are a lot of them in the population and they actually get down to the polling station, they are a huge advantage for the Conservatives. The latent potential for the Labour Party is younger women, and amongst that group in particular there is considerable latent support, particularly women under 24. But the issue for Labour is that most of these women didn't vote in 2005, and there's no clear evidence they will this time.
But for Kerry Goddard, who runs the feminist Fawcett Society, it's not enough for politicians to simply court women's votes.
We need to do two things. First of all, when they're developing their policies, they need to really think about the difference that it will make to men and women's lives. Basically, policies impact very differently on men and women. And secondly, they need to be telling us what specific policies they're going to put in place to tackle women's inequality.
A new survey for the Fawcett Society has highlighted some pretty interesting views among women as to what they want politicians to do for them. So we thought we'd bring together three women who hope to soon be able to make a difference, three rising stars of their respective parties, to discuss some of the findings.
I'm Priti Patel. I'm the Conservative candidate for the new Witham constituency.
I'm Rushanara Ali, Labour's parliamentary candidate for Bethnal Green and Bow.
My name's Katy Gordon and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Glasgow North.
So how do we make sure that more people like these end up there? Priti, let me start with you. Surely all women shortlists, for instance, would be a very useful tool for your party. You get in more people like yourself.
Well, I think there is a view that actually believes that, but I personally don't. I think back to my own selection in my constituency, I was not on an all-women shortlist. I personally feel that it's a bit demeaning to be put on a shortlist just because you are a woman. I mean, I think I'm as equal as any man that I went for selection up against.
Demeaning?
I don't think it's demeaning. The point is that we know from all the evidence that there is inbuilt discrimination and disadvantage facing women. And if we waited for this to be resolved without any intervention, then we would have to wait for another century before we see proper representation in Parliament.
But I do think, though, that half the problem is women particularly, being put off going into politics by the whole sort of playground, schoolboy playground atmosphere in the House of Commons and the whole macho culture. So I think it's very important to encourage women to come forward in the first place without all women shortlists. I think that you should be looking at working with the Advertising Standards Authority and working with professionals to try and find ways where you actually are labelling whether airbrushing is happening or in some other way indicating whether things have been touched up or not. And that was something that was coming very much from the women I spoke to in my constituency. In fact, one of the ladies I spoke to, she described how her daughter, who considers herself fat, but everyone else who knew her said, oh no, she's really pretty, had been crying herself to sleep at night because she had been so worried about seeing these images and not being able to live up to them.
Can I just say that these issues have existed for a long time. What's amplified them, I think, is the changes and advances in technology. So, 10, 15 years ago, airbrushing wasn't something that was very common. So with technology comes responsibility.
That's where you can't keep on regulating too. I mean, if we talk about images, these images now are international, they're global, internet, more television channels at home. You can't just keep policing everything, you really can't. And this is where the role of the parent, I absolutely maintain that's where the role of the parent comes in.
Pretty, your party is very keen on the idea of having marriage recognised in some way in the tax system. Do you think this is something that women want and will be good for them?
Well, to be honest, I mean, from what I've heard, not just on the doorstep, but families, mums that I speak to, they feel actually quite under pressure. Cost of childcare, for example, is astronomical in this country, it really is. So it's more about recognising, dare I say it, the challenges that they're up against. And if there is a mechanism or a way in which to recognise it in the right way, then yes.
Families come in all shapes and sizes and forms. So, you know, that policy will penalise widows, for instance, or mothers who are on their own through no fault of their own. It could be from violent households or whatever. And it does not put the interest of families at the centre of things. And I think that's a real concern, that it prejudices one type of family over another.
We're not saying that, actually. We are not discriminating for one group against another group. And I think that's actually down to the way that you're presenting it.
Family over another.
Well, we're not actually. We recognise, and I think, you know, there's a massive misconception out there. We absolutely recognise in this day and age that families come in all shapes, forms and sizes. People have some very different and difficult personal experiences. We recognise that. But at the same time...
provide any support to them.
Well, perhaps if the country wasn't so bankrupt through your government's irresponsible financial policies, it would be a different scenario.
You're proposing spending £800 million in 1 out of 20 families. 19 families will not benefit from that policy, and families, single parent families, widowed families, families with one parent through no fault of their own will not get any help.
A much more important way of actually using the taxation system to support families is to look at things like extending parental leave, making it parental leave rather than maternity leave, so that you can have that choice.
As for these three women, what they want is a seat in the House, but whether they'll be in government or on the opposition benches could depend on winning over female voters.